Hey everyone. Have you ever noticed your toddler just completely loses it over things that seem totally normal to you?
Yeah, like a loud noise or
Heh.
like scratchy clothing.
Yes, exactly. Well, today we're going deep on all things sensory processing in toddlers.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. We're diving into an excerpt today from Sensory Processing in Toddlers, Understanding Their Unique Sensory World.
Oh, I love that book.
Me too. It really opens your eyes to how differently toddlers can experience the world. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's all about how their brains take in information, like sights and sounds and textures and,
Smells, tastes.
yeah, all of it.
And it's got to get organized so they can actually make sense of things.
Right. But for some toddlers, that whole process, well, it's not so smooth.
Yeah, it's like they're experiencing everything on high volume almost.
Exactly. Imagine walking into a crowded market, with all the noise and the people and the smells.
Oh, I hate that. It's too much.
Right. Well, for some toddlers, everyday life can feel that intense all the time.
I never thought of it like that. No wonder they have such big reactions sometimes.
It's true. And the thing is, these differences in sensory processing are way more common than people think.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Sensory processing disorder, SPD, it affects about 1 in 20 kids.
Wow, 1 in 20.
A lot of toddlers.
That's a lot of toddlers. And it's not just those with an official diagnosis, right?
Right. Even toddlers without SPD can have sensitivities.
It makes you think back to your own kids, like when they were little. My son, he absolutely hated wearing jeans. It's just meltdown city.
Oh, I feel that. What was it about the jeans?
The seams, they drove him crazy.
Ugh, yeah, that makes sense. And that's exactly how these sensitivities can show up. It's not that kids are being difficult. They really are struggling with sensations that we might not even notice.
So if your toddler freaks out over a hand dryer or refuses to wear certain
Well,
clothes,
sensory overload could be the culprit.
interesting. Okay, so we're starting to get a handle on sensory processing, but what does this actually look like in different toddlers? The excerpt talks about two main types, right?
Yeah, you got your sensory avoiders and your sensory seekers.
Okay, so two ends of a spectrum.
Kinda, yeah. Avoiders, they're hypersensitive. So picture the toddler who bursts into tears at the sound of the blender.
Or covers their ears when music is playing.
Exactly. They just get overwhelmed so easily by all that sensory input.
And their reactions are their way of saying, too much, make it stop.
Right? It's their way of trying to regulate all that input and make the world feel a bit less intense.
Gotcha. And then on the other side, we have the sensory seekers, the kids who are always on the go.
Oh, yeah. These little ones, they crave sensory input. They love to spin, jump, crash into things, you name it.
It's like they can't get enough stimulation.
It's almost like their nervous systems need more fuel to work properly. And when they don't get enough, they might seem restless or even a bit out of control.
So they're trying to ramp up the sensory input to a level that feels right for them.
Exactly. And figuring out which category your toddler leans towards can help you understand their needs better.
So let's say you've got a little one who seems sensitive to certain sights or sounds. What are some things parents can do to make their world easier to handle? Ignoring it probably isn't the answer, right?
Definitely not. It's about creating a supportive environment. It's all about figuring out their triggers and either minimizing them or finding ways to give them the right kind of sensory input.
Now, before we get too into the practical stuff, the excerpt mentions sensory integration. I hear that term all the time, but I'm not really sure I get it. What does that mean, and how does it relate to all of this?
Sensory integration, it's a big one. It's how our brains take in all that sensory information and organize it so we can actually use it.
So it's how we can listen to someone talk while ignoring, the hum of the lights or walk across a room without bumping into everything.
You got it. But for some kids, that integration process doesn't work as smoothly.
Uh-huh. And that's where the problems come in.
Exactly. So, yeah, understanding sensory integration is super key to helping toddlers handle the world better.
Okay, that's making a lot more sense. So how does sensory integration actually relate to helping toddlers? Can we actually help improve how their brains handle all that input?
Definitely. That's where the idea of a sensory diet comes in.
A sensory diet? That sounds intriguing, but you're not talking about food, are you?
No, not food. Think of it like a personalized plan of activities and strategies that help regulate their sensory input throughout the day.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more. What kinds of things would be on this sensory menu, so to speak?
It's all about providing the right amount of sensory input. For some kids, it might be incorporating movement breaks into the day, like jumping on a trampoline or doing those animal walks. For others, it might be using calming sensory tools like a weighted blanket or maybe a sensory bottle with glitter and stuff.
It's fascinating how something as simple as a weighted blanket can make such a difference for some kids. Is there, like, a scientific reason why deep pressure is so calming?
There is deep pressure. It kind of mimics the feeling of being held or swaddled, and that releases all those good hormones, like serotonin and dopamine. It creates this feeling of calm, especially for kids who get overwhelmed easily.
Wow, I never knew that. That's why I love these deep dives. We always learn something new. So, creating a sensory diet is all about providing the right types of input at the right times. But how do parents even know where to begin?
Observation is key. Pay attention to what triggers your toddler, what they're drawn to, and what helps them calm down.
Okay, got it. So basically, become a sensory detective. I'm ready for some specific strategies for helping sensory avoiders and seekers. What's first on our list?
Well, let's start with a big one for lots of parents, meal times.
Ooh, yeah, meal times can definitely be a struggle.
It's a super sensory experience. And for toddlers with sensitivities, it can be a recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah. My niece, she went through this phase where she'd only eat beige foods. It was like chicken nuggets, bananas, and plain pasta for months.
Oh, wow.
Please. But even that picky eating can be tied to sensory processing. Some kids are just super sensitive to textures, smells, or even just how the food looks on their plate.
So how do you make meal times less stressful for everyone? What are some things parents can actually try?
One great tip is to, like, deconstruct the meal. So instead of putting everything together, serve it separately. That way kids can choose what they're experiencing, and it can make trying new things less overwhelming.
Oh, that's a great idea. It takes the pressure off and lets them explore at their own pace. What other mealtime magic tricks do you have up your sleeve?
Another good one. Offer a variety of textures, even within the same food group. Like you could have steamed broccoli, roasted broccoli, and raw broccoli all on the same plate.
It's like a sensory sampler platter. I love it.
Exactly. And remember, you want to make meal times positive. Avoid power struggles and focus on making it fun. Speaking of avoiding power struggles, clothing, another area where sensory issues can be a huge pain. Any advice for dressing a toddler who seems to hate clothes?
I think every parent has been there to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But for kids with sensory sensitivities, it can be torture. One common issue is tags. Try removing them or choosing tagless clothing.
Yeah, I had to cut tags out of everything when my son was little. It was a little annoying, but it made such a difference.
And fabrics are important too. Natural, breathable fabrics, like cotton. They tend to be better than synthetic materials that can feel scratchy.
Got it. So soft, comfy clothes that feel good on their skin. Any other fashion tips for our sensory sensitive toddlers?
If seams are a problem, try turning clothes inside out.
Really? That's interesting.
It might seem a little weird, but it can help. And sometimes just giving kids some choice in what they wear can make a big difference.
Makes them feel more in control, which is a good thing with sensory processing in general, right? Okay, so we've covered meal times and clothes. What about the whole home environment? How can we make that more sensory friendly?
That's key. One of the best things you can do is create a sensory zone.
A sensory zone. Tell me more.
Think of it as like a designated spot that's specifically for your child's sensory needs. For sensory seekers, it might be an area with pillows and blankets where they can jump and tumble.
So a safe space for them to go a little wild. What about a sensory zone for avoiders? What would that look like?
For avoiders, it's about creating a calm space. Maybe a tent draped with blankets, a beanbag chair in a quiet corner, or a spot with dim lighting and some calming sensory bottles.
Like a little retreat where they can escape and reset. I love that. So we've got sensory zones. Any other ways to tweak the home environment?
Think about your lighting. Harsh fluorescent lights can be super overwhelming. Try softer, warmer bulbs in the rooms where your child spends a lot of time.
Right. We don't always think about how much lighting can affect us. What about sound? Any advice there?
White noise machines can be helpful. You could also try playing calming music or nature sounds.
Mm.
And, strategically placing rugs can absorb sound and create a quieter atmosphere.
So many great tips. It's amazing how many little things we can do to help. I'm feeling a lot more informed already. But I know we've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore. Join us next time as we dive into specific strategies for handling everyday challenges like meal times, tantrums, and those public meltdowns.
We'll be back with more tips and insights to help you navigate the wonderful world of sensory processing. Until then, happy exploring.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deeper into how to help our toddlers navigate the world when their sensory systems are, well, a little different. Before the break, we started talking about a sensory diet. Can we dig into that a little more? What does that actually look like in practice?
It's kind of like a puzzle. You're figuring out what activities and strategies work best throughout the day to help your toddler regulate their sensory system. And just like a regular diet, it's all about balance.
Okay, so if a child is, say, a sensory avoider,
Hmm.
are we trying to, like, reduce sensory input all day long? Not exactly. It's more about being smart about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, minimizing those overwhelming sensations is important, but we also want to give them the right kind of input to help them feel more grounded.
Okay, I think I'm getting that. Can you give me like a real life example? What might be on the menu for a little avoider?
Sure, let's say you have a child who um, really hates loud noises. In the morning, you might start with some calming activities like playing quietly with soft toys or reading in a dim room. Then, as the day goes on, you can gradually introduce more stimulating activities, but you always want to keep that focus on regulation.
So it's about being aware of the intensity and type of sensory input throughout the day and finding a rhythm that works for that specific child.
Yeah, exactly. And you can actually work those regulating activities right into your routine. Say, your toddler tends to lose it during transitions. Try incorporating some heavy work beforehand.
Heavy work. I've never heard of that. What is that?
Think of activities where they use their muscles, like pushing, pulling, or lifting, carrying a laundry basket, helping push the grocery cart, or even a big bear hug. All of those can give that deep pressure input that helps them feel more organized.
Interesting. So, like a little workout for their sensory system. Okay, now what about the sensory seekers? What does a sensory diet look like for them?
For sensory seekers, it's often about giving them more chances to move and get that sensory input. Jumping, spinning, crashing into things, anything that really gets their bodies moving and all their senses engaged.
I remember those days. It was like my son was constantly in motion.
And it's not about trying to stop that energy. It's about finding positive ways to channel it. So yeah, give
Yeah.
them those movement breaks, jumping on a trampoline, swinging on a swing set, playing with those toys that have different textures, even rolling around on the floor can help.
It sounds like outdoor play is really important for those kids.
Absolutely. Being outside gives them a ton of different sensory experiences. The feeling of sunshine, the wind, the sounds of nature. It's like a big sensory playground.
I know we talked about those sensory zones we can create at home. Can you give some specific examples of what those might look like? I'm picturing a room full of pillows and blankets, and honestly, it sounds kind of fun.
Sensory zones can be whatever works for your family, simple or, more elaborate. For a sensory seeker, it could be a corner of the living room with a crash pad, a mini trampoline, and some of those textured toys. Some people even hang a swing from the ceiling.
Ooh, an indoor swing. Now that's a good idea. What about for the sensory avoiders? What kind of calming sensory zone could we make for them?
Think cozy and enclosed, maybe a pop-up tent draped with blankets or a beanbag chair tucked away in a quiet corner. Even just a special calm down spot with dim lighting and some calming sensory bottles could work.
It's like creating a little escape for them to reset and recharge. So sensory zones are all about making spaces to either give them more input or minimize it. Are there any other ways we can modify the home environment to make it more sensory friendly?
You bet. Think about things like lighting. Those harsh fluorescent lights can be a lot for some kids. Switching to softer, warmer bulbs, especially in areas where your child spends a lot of time, can make a huge difference.
Good point. Lighting definitely affects how we feel. What about sound? That seems to be a big trigger for lots of kids.
It definitely can be. White noise machines are a lifesaver.
Yeah.
You could also try calming music or nature sounds. And don't forget about rugs. They can actually absorb sound and make things a bit quieter.
It's all about paying attention to those little details, right? The stuff we might not even think about, but that makes a big difference for them. Okay, one last thing I wanted to touch on: transitions. It seems like those everyday shifts from one activity to the next can be really tough for some toddlers. Any secrets for making transitions smoother?
Toddlers love predictability, especially those with sensory sensitivities. Visual schedules with pictures can be super helpful. Even just a little countdown, like 5 minutes until bath time, 4 minutes until bath time, can work wonders.
That's such a good idea. It lets them know what's coming and helps them feel less anxious. This is all so helpful. But what about those times when, despite our best efforts, we still end up with a meltdown? It can be so frustrating.
It's important to remember that you're not alone in this. Parenting is tough, especially when you're dealing with sensory processing challenges. Don't be afraid to reach out for support.
You mean like from other parents?
Yeah, and occupational therapists. They are amazing resources, and there are so many online groups where you can connect with other parents who totally get it.
That's so important. We don't have to figure this all out on our own. Speaking of occupational therapy, what's one thing you wish more parents knew about it?
I wish more people knew that it's not just for, like, really serious issues.
Yeah.
Occupational therapy can help any kid who's struggling with sensory processing, even if they don't have an official diagnosis. And it's always better to get support early.
So it's about giving kids the tools they need to, handle the world a little better. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about sensory processing, how to create a more sensory-friendly environment, and even how to get support when we need it.
It's been a great conversation. And remember, the most important thing is to approach your child's sensory journey with curiosity, compassion, and, well, a sense of adventure.
I love that. We're all on this adventure together, right?
Exactly. And in our next segment, we're going to get even more practical. We'll be diving into specific strategies for those everyday challenges like picky eating, clothing sensitivities, and of course, those public meltdowns.
All right, everyone, welcome back for round 3. We've spent this deep dive exploring why some toddlers experience the world a little differently when it comes to sights, sounds, smells, all those sensory things. Now, I want to make sure our listeners walk away with some seriously practical tips. What do you say, ready to empower those parents?
Let's do it. Let's give them some strategies they can use, like right now. Last time we were talking about public meltdowns. You're in the grocery store and suddenly your toddler erupts, like full-on volcano.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. It's not fun.
Definitely not. It's stressful for everyone involved. But understanding the sensory side of things can really help.
Yep.
So first things first, stay calm. It sounds simple, but your calm can actually help your child calm down too.
It's true. When I would get all flustered, it just made things worse.
And then try to reduce the sensory overload. Maybe you can move to a quieter aisle or, dim the lights on your phone or even just give him a hug.
Oh, yeah. I used to think I had to talk my son through his meltdowns, but sometimes just being quiet was actually more helpful.
Exactly. Okay, let's switch gears to meal times because those could be another sensory battleground. One thing that can help is to deconstruct the meal.
Deconstruct the meal? What do you mean?
Instead of piling everything together on their plate, serve things separately, like
Yeah.
the protein in one spot, the carbs in another, the veggies in another.
Oh, like those bento boxes.
Yes, exactly. It gives them more control. They can choose what they want to explore without feeling overwhelmed.
That's such a good idea. Speaking of mealtime struggles, we have to talk about picky eating.
Picky eating. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so common. And it's often connected to those sensory preferences. Some kids are just really sensitive to certain textures or even just how the food looks.
That's so true. My friend's son, she wouldn't eat anything green. Turned out it wasn't the taste, it was the color. She started adding more color to his meals, and guess what? He started trying new things.
It's amazing how these sensitivities can show up in ways we don't expect, right? So yeah, instead of forcing new foods, try offering different textures within the same food group. Steamed broccoli, roasted broccoli, raw broccoli. You get the idea.
So it's about making mealtime an adventure, not a battle. Okay, let's move on to clothes. Another minefield, am I right?
Tell me about it. Tags, seams, scratchy fabrics. It can all be so irritating.
Yeah, and for kids who are sensitive to that stuff, it's like torture.
It really can be. But the good news is there are simple things you can do. Try taking the tags out of clothes or buying tagless clothing. And fabrics matter too. Natural fabrics like cotton are usually better than synthetic ones. Oh, and if seams are a problem, you can actually try turning their clothes inside out.
Inside out. That's a good trick. I wish I had known that one. Okay, let's zoom out a little. We talked earlier about making the home environment more sensory friendly. Those sensory zones are a great idea. Can we dive into those a little more?
For sure. For sensory seekers, remember, their zone should be all about movement. Think crash pads, a mini trampoline, maybe a swing if you have the space. It's all about giving them a safe place to get all that energy out.
And for those little sensory avoiders, we want to create that calming space, right?
Exactly. Dim lighting, soft pillows and blankets, maybe some calming sensory bottles, and a white noise machine. It should be a place where they can escape the chaos and just relax.
I love the idea of these little retreats for them. So we've got sensory zones. Any other quick tips for making the whole house more sensory friendly?
Think about the lighting. Swap out those harsh overhead lights for softer, warmer bulbs, especially in the rooms where they spend the most time.
Lighting can make such a difference. What about sound? Any advice on that front?
White noise machines are amazing. Calming music or nature sounds can help too. And don't underestimate the power of rugs. They can absorb sound and make things a little quieter.
Okay, one last thing before we wrap up. Transitions. Those everyday shifts from one activity to the next that can be so tricky, especially for toddlers with sensory sensitivities. Any advice on making those transitions go a little smoother?
Toddlers, especially those with sensory issues, really thrive on predictability. Visual schedules with pictures can be a game changer. You can even do a little countdown, like 5 minutes until bath time, 4 minutes until bath time.
That's brilliant. I'm definitely going to try that one. This has been such a helpful deep dive. But I know parenting, especially parenting a sensory sensitive child, can be really challenging. What advice would you give to parents who are feeling, a little overwhelmed?
Honestly, the most important thing is to remember you're not alone. Don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's from other parents, a support group, or an occupational therapist. There are people out there who get it and they can help.
That's such a good reminder. We're all in this together, right? Speaking of support, what do you wish more parents knew about occupational therapy?
I wish they knew that it's not just for kids with, major challenges. OT can benefit any child who's struggling with sensory processing, even without a formal diagnosis. And the earlier you get support, the better.
It's about giving kids the tools they need to handle the world and, well, feel good in their own skin. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've learned so much about sensory processing, how to create a more sensory-friendly environment for our little ones, and how to get support when we need it.
Absolutely. And remember, the best thing you can do is approach your child's sensory journey with curiosity, compassion, and a sense of adventure. Parenting is an adventure for sure.
So well said. And to all those parents out there, remember to celebrate the small wins, ask for help when you need it, and trust your instincts. You know your child best. Until next time, everyone, happy exploring.